So we got to start looking at everything. We're in uncharted waters. And speaking of waters, I thought of an image as I was meditating this morning because I wanted you to get the real picture that would stick with you. It's easy to hear numbers and you walk out. We all have problems, and you could forget easily some of these things. I was thinking of the Titanic. That's a terrible thing to think about. But, you know, when I think about these congressmen that are trying to keep their seats, I said this one time on the floor of Congress, there were no safe rooms on the Titanic. There are no safe districts in America if this country goes under. And yet, every congressman that I knew and know today are worried about getting reelected. Who's thinking about the country? Who's thinking about telling the people the truth about where we're going? And then it dawned on me, we're talking about the bailout of Wall Street. Is that good for Main Street? And then I came up with the topic, subprime national debt. The real bailout is yet to come. It's the United States of America. Now, it's not going to happen overnight because the baby boomers are just now arriving to ask for their Social Security benefits and Medicare. But is this going to be a gigantic tax on the next generation because we decided to consume their money? Is this intergenerational equity? Is this what America's all about? My parents were immigrants. My dad wouldn't move from the Bronx to Westchester in 1957 till he had the money in the bank. He wouldn't even take a mortgage on the house because that's how ingrained. When you come from poor families and you had to survive, you just want to have self-sufficiency. And I never forgot how he just took the money out of the bank and bought that house in 1957. Little did I know I'd be the congressman representing that district 20 years later. But that's America for you, okay? So we have now this issue of a subprime national debt. And the picture that came to mind as we talk about Wall Street and Main Street, do you remember the scene, the owner of the Titanic, this arrogant person who risked not only everybody's money, but everybody's life because he wanted to be the first one to reach New York in the least amount of time? Do you remember that? Okay. Wasn't that arrogance personified? Greed? Don't you think this is what happened on Wall Street? But think about what happened after that. This is the guy that jumped in a boat and pushed somebody off the boat. He's the arrogant one that, because he wants to make more money, obviously he wants to advertise, he's got the fastest ships so he can build more. Then when it came time to save the ladies and the children, he took the seat of somebody, hit his head, and went. Is that what is happening to Main Street today? Is Wall Street now pushing Main Street off the boat? Have we figured out, is this a bailout for Wall Street, or is this good for us? I still don't know. I'm an accountant. I don't know where they got $700 billion from. I don't know how that's going to be dispersed. I don't know what they're going to pay for these subprime mortgages. God forbid they pay face. Some people are going to get very rich. And I see where Mr. Giuliani already has set up another law firm, and Molinari is now joining it because they want to now get into the game of this. So, you know, it bothers me. One of the reasons I didn't become a paid lobbyist, I wanted to stick with this message, and I had to have the credibility to do that. Now, let me just go into a couple of other things, going back to the debt. I don't know how we're going to deal with this massive debt. But if we're not honest with America to at least tell them what the dimensions of the debt are, we have actuaries who can certify what the real liability for Social Security is. Every corporation has to do it. Why are we afraid to hire an outside actuary to do it? See what happened in New York State a couple of months ago? The union hired an actuary and convinced the legislature that this was a legitimate actuary, and they wanted to change something, and the actuary said, it really doesn't cost anything. We found out it cost $200 million. But they accepted this phony actuary paid by the union, his determination on what that change would be. And we're doing a lot of that in Washington today. So I wanted to leave you with the message that's on this book. Why did I put on this book a credit card? Because as a congressman, I carried one. And it wasn't Visa or MasterCharge. Let me show it to you. Let me show it to you. I probably did this a few years ago, and if you remember it, here it is. Has my picture on it. You know what this is? Anybody tell me what this is? This is a congressman's voting card. A congressman votes. At the end of a row of seats, there's a computer terminal. You put this in, you press green, by your light, yes, a green light goes up. If you press no, a red light. Present, an orange light. I realized when I was putting this in that this was the card creating the deficits and raising the national debt. So I call this, in chapter 1 of my book, the most expensive credit card in the world. A congressman's voting card. And here on the front cover of the book is a version of the congressional credit line card. Credit line, unlimited. Expiration date, never. Bill to future generations. Now, if you want to have some fun, look at the letters in the appendix of this book, because I wrote Ronald Reagan a letter saying, everybody's saying that you are the biggest deficit spender of all time, but I figured out something here. And my partners at Arthur Anderson did the calculations, and I took the 4 years of Carter and your first 4 years, Mr. President, and by the way, this was published in the Wall Street Journal, and you're not the biggest deficit spender. It's Carter. Well, how could that be? Well, it is because we don't have a capital budget in the United States of America. So everything we spend on assets gets added to the deficit. It doesn't get put on the books as an asset and depreciated and allocated properly over generational use and paid over the generations that are using it. Every corporation has to do that. So I sent that in to the president, and lo and behold, it goes to Baker. You remember he became his chief of staff. And one day I'm on the floor of Congress, and who comes up to me? Dick Cheney. And you're going to see my letter to Dick Cheney in the back, 1987. He says, Joe, you know, they're very interested in what you said, but they don't really understand the difference between the accounting system that we're using and the one that... So I had to do 4 pages, Accounting 101, to go through the major items that affect the difference between government accounting and the cash basis that they were using. And then when I gave them a good answer, you'll see the OMB director, a CPA, a good man, Jim Miller, sending me another letter, 3 pages, and then ending, Joe, you know, as a practical matter, we can't do what you're saying. It'll make the deficit look bigger. I says, Jim, it's already bigger. You're papering over it. And that's exactly what they're doing in Washington all the time, papering over it. So I hope you will read this book. There are 8 exciting chapter titles. The one on Social Security is Congressional Child Abuse, Send the Kids the Bill. I call it the biggest Ponzi scheme in the world. We're taking it from one generation and giving it to the other. Unfortunately, we're taking it from the future and spending it now. I don't know how we're going to get the money to really pay for it. But with that, I want to also, in front of you, do you have the Association for Government Accountants? Was that handed out? Yes. Okay, read that. I was put in charge of a commission in 1993 by the major group in Washington and the U.S. for government accounting. It's called the Association of Government Accountants, because I was complaining so loud, they said, what can we do? I said, you can appoint a blue ribbon commission and put me as chairman. And I'll get good people from around America, controllers from the various states, and we'll give you the answers as to what we have to do in Washington. There it is. Read it. 4 pages. None of it has been implemented since 1993. Congressmen have gotten it. They probably just threw it away, figuring nobody's going to pay attention to this. And that's the issue. Can we become a constituency for this change? I'm giving this to you because I'd like you to send it to your congressman and your 2 senators if you're from New York State. If you're not from New York State and you're in America, please send it to your representatives with a note saying, I heard this guy, Joe DioGuardi, he says he's a former congressman and a CPA, and what he said made sense. And by the way, here's the commission he headed, and why haven't you adopted any of these? And does this mean we're going to have another bailout? Maybe Washington this time? So I think it's important that you get that message across, and I think that's what the Rotary is all about, you know, to get change. And that's why I'm here. Thank you very much.
Great. Right here.